Good evening and welcome to Gamesplaining. In this audio series, I'm reading the thing. Okay, let me just read the thing. I'll just read the thing. I'm sorry. Okay. Good evening and welcome to Gamesplaining. This audio series features myself, Eric Crosby, writer and creator of several video essays concerning popular game franchises, and Jake Clark, who has played a sum total of 2 video games to completion in his life. In each episode, Jake will bring to me the title of a game that he has chanced across, and I will do my level best to explain its mechanics, narrative, and cultural importance in a In each episode, Jake will bring me the title of a game that he has chanced across, and I will do my level best to explain its mechanics, narrative, and cultural importance in a timely fashion. Along the way, Jake will impart careful selections of his encyclopedic knowledge of literature, film, and history. And with that, my co-host, Jake Clark.
Howdy, boys and girls. How you doing?
Is that relevant to today's game?
Somewhat. I end up like more Western swing for some reason. It does fit the time.
I see.
A bit. The game this episode is one I have no played knowledge of.
Interesting.
And I know nothing about the story. But I do know one prominent character in it, or at least who plays that character. And I know a lot about the thing it's riffing on, sort of the art that informs it. The title, first one, is The City of Angels. In acronym, and a very posh word for
the classic LA Noire.
That's right.
Okay. Yeah, I love this game. Wow, that's a good pick. I really love this game.
So I'm really interested in it for a few reasons that you probably know. Like for really obvious reasons. Like I'm really interested in the sort of film and literature that informs it a lot. Like I read I saw and read The Big Sleep at a very formative moment in my life, and I love Raymond Chandler. He's still one of my favorite writers. And I've seen a lot of these movies, like a lot of like film noirs and like detective movies that are around that, because a lot of them are easy to find. Like there used to be a video store, which we've both been to, it's closed now, that would used to have these giveaways. And one of the best deals you'd get were these collections of melodramas, film noir, or screwball comedies. Like usually,
the 4-in-1 movie packs that you find at the Shoppers or whatever at the drugstore.
Like TCM packs, things like that.
Oh, nice.
Although they were like a third of the price they were at the Shoppers because they were like resale. Like those TCM packs are like were like $20.
Yeah, and there's usually one good movie and 3 terrible ones.
But the terrible ones are how you learn about how you learn some awesome bits of the genre. Like, oh no, they did that to Peter Lorre. And the thing kind of around LA Noire that I think is the thing I know because you've told me is that there's 2 things I know. There is some kind of deception mechanic, which is very interesting given, I guess, the level of animation, which I'm not familiar with, and Cosgrove from Mad Men is the main character.
It's actually several of the cast of Mad Men in that game. It's not just him. There's a few guys in there, although I couldn't name them off the top of my head. It's been some years since I played that game, so I couldn't name them off the top of my head. However, I think I can do a pretty good job of explaining what goes on. I have a pretty good recall of that game because it impressed me a lot.
All right, I got some questions about it, but elevator pitch me. What's it about?
Well, I won't tell you what's it about. To elevator pitch, I think is a different thing when it comes to video games, right? And with regards to video games, I learned in my game design classes that the way to elevator pitch a game is to say it's like something crossed with something.
All right.
And so to me, LA Noire is basically, how shall I say it? It's Grand Theft Auto crossed with like an old LucasArts adventure game where there's like an open world that you can explore and drive around and do, shootouts and all that good open world business. But also large sums of the game are just walking around, looking at stuff, investigating things, taking notes, that kind of thing. And it really does follow that lineage of games, of the old adventure games, where you really do have to pay attention to your surroundings and figure out what's going on in these crimes. Now, this game's quite old at this point. I believe it came out in 2010, if I'm recalling correctly. It might have been 2012, somewhere around that range. And at the time, the facial animations were just bonkers. Like, no one had seen facial animation like this before. And that's what carries the main kind of one of the main mechanics of the game, which is, like you say, this deception thing where NPCs will talk to you, but you have to read their facial cues and compare evidence to what they're saying to try and suss out if they're telling the truth or not. And you can respond to them by saying, oh, I think you're telling the truth, or I think you're lying. You can do the good cop, bad cop thing, that kind of stuff. And so it comes together in this really interesting package.
Can you beat people with a phone book at any point?
Oh, I don't know about phone book, but you can beat the shit out of a lot of people.
Because he's LAPD, right?
Yeah.
The phone book Chicago, but yeah. If this is the 1940s LAPD, we can get into that a little later, but yeah.
So why don't you shoot me with some of your questions? There's lots to say about this game, but I want to hear what you're interested in.
Okay, so the first thing that this reminded me of when I was being taught about it is this is going to be a very specific question. Do you know what year it's set in? What kind of events are happening in the city?
I believe so. This should help you date it. One of the large crimes that you investigate in the game is the Black Dahlia murders.
Okay, yeah.
So it's right around there. Phelps is actually a World War II veteran in the game, and that's Cosgrove. That's your main character.
Okay, so the thing that this reminded me of the most, just seeing like the art from it, I kind of took an ogle at some of the artwork, is James Ellroy. Are you familiar with James Ellroy at all?
I'm not.
James Ellroy is a writer. He's alive now. He is famous for writing like a series of novels they're detective novels about and around the LAPD. Okay. They're extremely visceral, sordid, and bizarre books. A lot of he wrote LA Confidential. He wrote, if you saw that movie Black Dahlia with Aaron Eckhart, he wrote that as well.
Okay. I have not seen that either.
That one's weird.
Yeah.
No, very few people saw that.
You know what? The most recent noirish movie I can think of watching was Gangster Squad, which was like a long time ago that came out.
Funny you mentioned that because Mickey Cohen, like Sean Penn in Gangster Squad, is his death is the backdrop for LA Confidential.
I see. Okay, so it kind of picks up after that.
He was a real guy. Like LA Confidential makes something of Johnny Stompanato, who was his lieutenant, who was married to Lana Turner at one point and eventually got killed by her daughter.
Oh, God.
Because he was a brutal domestic abuser.
Oh, well, serves him right.
Yeah, few mourn for Johnny Stompanato.
Yeah.
LA Confidential reminds me a lot of sort of in and around Black Dahlia, because another thing in the Black Dahlia movie, and Ellroy has done this a lot, is also the Zoot Suit riots. Which I think were during the war.
Okay.
But that was essentially a race riot between the LAPD and most of the, specifically Chicano population of LA, as far as I'm aware. And it's a very complicated thing. Like, they were wearing zoot suits, was the style of the thing. There would have been, moves to ban zoot suits, ostensibly because they took too much cloth during the war to make. But that was...
okay.
One kind of thing. I was wondering if that would come up because I thought, okay, it's going to be either Zoot Suit riots, Black Dahlia, maybe George Reeves, Christopher Reeves, the thing that happened in Hollywoodland.
Well, so to tell you the truth, I actually never finished this game, but I do know what happens in the end. So I can't speak to if the Reeves stuff is in there, but the Black Dahlia murders were actually kind of where I stopped playing the game, just because at the time it was a very long game. And I didn't really have the energy to finish it. But I think what you were mentioning tapped into something interesting about the game, because you mentioned that this Ellroy guy, that he gets into the kind of bizarre, into the strange in this stuff. And I think the game has this really uncanny quality to it, not just because the facial animations are dated, although that certainly adds to this uncanny quality, but your protagonist, Phelps, can just drive around and, like Grand Theft Auto, run over pedestrians and open up with Tommy gun fire on people in the street. And, it just creates this insane atmosphere where in the story missions, you're this, this depressed and kind of hard-boiled detective trying to root out crime and, solve murders and do right by the law. And then in the gameplay, you can, run over people and shoot up buildings and stuff like that. And it's just this weird, bizarre disconnect. And it reminds me a lot of like these really schlocky gangster movies where you'll have these police and these detective characters who are supposed to be, relatable and the good guys, right? And yet they just have these blowout shootouts where they just destroy hundreds of thousands of dollars of public property,
Yeah.
or just like murder civilians like completely incidentally to what they're trying to accomplish. And it's so bizarre. And the game is still excellent, even in spite of this. It's just like, and a lot of people have made this criticism of it. This is nothing new that I'm saying, but it's just hilarious to have these like, these really down to earth and quite sober, portrayals of murder and its effect on the people left behind, and then to have your protagonist just blast people away with a handgun, revolver, shooting people in the head over and over again, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's wild.
That happens a lot. So that's very James Ellroy. Like a lot of his and part of it is his books are like kind of deranged. Like he has this weird, very staccato writing style it's very interesting because so I'm just going to read the monologue. This is off his Wikipedia page that he opens a lot of public appearances with.
Sure.
To give you an idea of how he directly interacts with the book. Good evening, peepers, prowlers, pederasts, panty sniffers, punks, and pimps. I'm James Ellroy, the demon dog with the hog log, the foul owl with the death growl, the white knight of the far right, and the slick trick with the donkey dick. I'm the author of 16 books, masterpieces all. They precede all my future masterpieces. These books will leave you reamed, steamed, and dry clean, tied, dyed, swept to the side, true blued, tattooed, and bafongooed. These books are for the whole fucking family, if the name of your family is Manson.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
That's excellent. Oh man.
That's his opening pitch to like people he's signing books for.
Oh man. That definitely rings true of the totally bizarre nature of gamifying detective work in this way, Like I think with film as much as in this game, like detective fiction could stand to have a lot less action. And like I personally think a game like LA Noire could have easily had no action at all and still been excellent. Like you have so many games these days that are just walking around talking to people. They could have very easily done that with a detective game.
Kind of the way you've described Mass Effect to me.
Yeah, and that monologue just it rings true of what I imagine goes through Phelps's head while he's in these massive shootouts. Like he's just like repeating these mantras to himself about how what he's doing is right or something like that. Like the protagonists never really actually call out their behavior in the game, right? No matter how many people they kill in the street, like your partner will like call you out for it, but you can't straight up lose the game by doing that stuff, which is just hilarious.
Yeah, it's a good way to gamify the LAPD in general.
Yeah.
So that's very interesting to me because you're just capable of cartoonish violence then, should you want.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's a lot like Grand Theft Auto in this like kind of open world, right? You can steal cars from civilians, under the pretext of commandeering them. But there's nothing stopping you from breaking the law and just destroying property and killing people in the street indiscriminately.
So that's the violence aspect of it. And like the relationship of violence to noir is pretty strong. But there's another thing that comes hand in hand with it. And that, I mean, having mentioned Grand Theft Auto, I remember reading an article about something involving coffee. But let's just say, what's the sex situation? Because that comes hand in hand. It's film noir.
Well, the strange thing... Sorry, go ahead.
Although, like, I'm just going to check myself. Is like, Ellroy writes... neo-noir, post-noir. It's weird because film noir itself is like a Western. Like it's a really time-specific genre.
Yeah.
But it's an affect that goes on and on. Like there's neo-noirs made. Gangster Squad is kind of that cop movie as well. But like...
Yeah, and like there's revisionist Westerns, you can do a revisionist noir as well, right? There's a lot of different angles you can take on it.
Yeah, Drive is that. With Ryan Gosling is a great example of that.
Yeah, so with regards to LA Noire and... sex and sexuality. I can't even recall if Phelps, the main character, has a wife or not in the story or anything like that. I don't recall off the top of my head any like sex or anything like that happens between your protagonist and other characters, although perhaps it happens after I stopped playing. However, what I will say is that the game is, kind of expected of 2010's games, although certainly not acceptable, is that the sexualization of like murder victims is really strange. Like you can find and investigate the naked corpses of women, and it's like it's clearly presented in a way that's it's supposed to be a bit gruesome, but like the fact that you can just investigate and pore over these like naked corpses is just, it feels really weird to me. Like it I don't know if the game necessarily is meaning to sexualize it or anything like that, but it feels so strange when you do this stuff. And like going off of that, and this is the case with a lot of fiction that takes place in this time period, like there's just no female characters in the story that are really like around for longer than one arc, and that really have much to say for themselves besides being victims of crimes and stuff. And I feel like if a game like this was made today, it would take a much different approach with that kind of stuff. Like it's trying to be period authentic to a fault, I think.
This is the thing that kind of reminds me of, again, because the thing this reminds me of a lot more is James Ellroy, more than I think like the film noir material, because I think that is what it's trying to be, right? It's trying to be a period piece.
Yeah.
That's what Ellroy writes. In Ellroy's books, like the thing about you're saying about the sexualization of murder victims, he does that in Black Dahlia, which is really weird because his personal interest in Black Dahlia involves the fact that his mother apparently looked a lot like Elizabeth Short. And disappeared or died around the same time. God. And I'm sure that based on the previous monologue, you can tell that has probably had no side effects whatsoever. As the way he has conducted his life since. So that was kind of what I was expecting there to imagine. So you can't do, I guess there's one, like basically the scene I was kind of building to is there a scene where, because this happens in Ellroy's movie, this happens famously, like not famously, but frequently in LA Confidential, is there a scene where you're going to beat up a woman in like a moment of catharsis? I asked that very specifically because of James Ellroy, because that happens in LA Confidential. I'm assuming probably not, which is, we'll assume the best of the people who made this.
The team that made the game doesn't really exist anymore. The game kind of took so long and so much effort to produce that it led to the kind of folding of the studio. Which was quite unfortunate because the game is considered a masterpiece, right? And sorry, I got distracted while you were talking because I was looking up the characters in the game, and Mickey Cohen actually does appear in the game, and I just completely forgot about that, apparently.
Oh, wild. Who plays him?
Patrick Fischler.
Oh, okay. I have no idea who that is.
He's in a movie called The Black Dahlia, so there you go.
Oh, that's the movie. That's the one I'm talking about. Yeah, Brian De Palma directed it. I wonder if he played... Was Mickey Cohen in that movie?
Maybe. Let's see. Let's look.
Oh, man. Connections.
No, he plays some district attorney. Sorry, I got distracted by that, though. I was trying to find out if there were any other female characters in the game that I was missing that like have huge roles or something that I was underplaying. But if you look at the cast list, it's just like all men and then one woman on the Wikipedia page.
So kind of zeroing in on another film noir theme, I want to ask, is loss a theme? And does that kind of crop up at all?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Because like I said, Phelps is a war veteran, right? So that plays into a lot of, he's kind of an alcoholic, as your noir people usually are.
He spends a lot of time staring into that sweet brown liquor and cigarette in hand, kind of dreaming of that dame over at the dance hall.
Yep.
That's why I'm drinking some CC right now, which is another film noir point I realize is that's a bit of a tangent, but I thought it was appropriate.
Yeah, I think a lot of the loss comes in with the victims as well, like the people that you talk to along the way who've been affected by loss, that kind of thing. But yeah, Phelps himself has kind of a very tragic arc to him. He actually ends up dying by the end of the game. He never really amounts to much besides, he solves cases, obviously, but he's never happy. And like a lot of noir characters, ends up worse than he started by the end.
kind of trapped in, does it kind of go like quicksand? Like he gets trapped kind of in these events that just continue escalating beyond his ability to control them.
Yeah, exactly. The story takes the form of like well, in gameplay and in narrative, you kind of climb the ranks going through the different departments of the LAPD until eventually, yeah, you're going after a crime too big to handle, and Phelps ends up dying in a sewer.
Oh, jeez.
He gets drowned in a sewer. Yeah.
Drowned in a sewer.
Yeah.
Okay, again, very Elroy. Also, that's a very, just the ending. I see the last frame of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Just because the film noirs often end, like, endings of film noirs are a really interesting thing. I think if you're a film student, it would actually kind of boot to study them.
Yeah.
Because of the ways they had to work. I can especially imagine one now, or like a kind of contemporary noir film just ending with that level of bleak violence.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of them couldn't. Like, a lot of them were not able to do that under the standards of the Hays Code. Some of them did. Like, I'm trying to think of one. Like, I think, I'm not going to speak out of turn. The one good example, I think, because I mentioned Quicksand, that's a noir movie from that time. It has Mickey Rooney in it.
Wow.
He's the main character.
Uh-huh.
And like the theme is, so he does this thing where he works at like a gas station. It's very low rent, the entire movie is, but he steals like $20 to go out on a date with a woman.
Mm-hmm.
And then he has to progressively cover his losses, but the sum gets much, much bigger.
I see.
To the point where he's robbing a loan shark for thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
And then gets into a shootout with the police. But it does end with him, like, he's in, like, the arm sling, and he's getting carried away. He's like, I'll serve my time. They're like, yeah, you will. Yeah. Just to end kind of happy. Because I don't think you could have done that with Mickey Rooney. Actually, you couldn't have done that probably with anybody, but he wasn't going to die at the end of the movie. But that was kind of what it seemed like it would build to. That movie's actually really good, kind of like surprisingly good for capturing this escalating feeling of tension and desperation. That's a lot of, like, what noirs did. Like, the genre that I think this kind of exists in or reminds me of is, like, I'm trying to think of ones that are explicitly set in LA, and the ones that I remember are there's two with Vince Edwards, and they're made in the 50s, and they don't really feel like film noirs because they're just mostly during the day. But how's it go? With Murder by Contract is one, and City of Fear is the other one. And in one of them, Murder by Contract, he plays a hitman. That movie is a 90s movie that was made in the 50s, basically. And City of Fear, he plays a junkie, I think, who comes into possession of radioactive material. It doesn't end well. Yeah. Although if you're a junkie going through withdrawal and you have radioactive material, you're like, oh man, I didn't know I was going to sweat this bad. That one gets dark. That one goes to a really weird place. But Murder by Contract is like, he's an outsider kind of coming to LA, and he kind of just takes in the sights.
Sure.
A little bit, and then he just plots to kill this woman to prevent her from testifying. And it's one of those things where there's a way it's a film noir that is kind of unrelated to subject matter.
Well, I think something you tapped in there with someone coming from outside and in is the theme of alienation that seems to come through in a lot of these films and these stories as well.
Yes.
Like, especially because a lot of these guys were coming back after a war, right? They don't know anybody. They don't have anything at home really except their wives that they have not seen in years, that kind of stuff, right? And so a lot of these stories, and LA Noire as well, deal with this kind of alienation experienced by the protagonists, whatever form that might take. And in the case of LA Noire, I think a big part of it is largely because Phelps is kind of he's far too devoted to his work in a way that's kind of consumes his life. He's always on the case. He doesn't really make time for other things, which is, you're again another protagonist, another noir protagonist hallmark, right? Don't make time for life, and alienated by the world.
That's a detective movie hallmark, I think. I think that's not necessarily a noir one. They overlap a lot.
Sure.
One thing that I think is really interesting about noir is that it's about corruption a lot of the time.
Yes, yeah.
About how good characters fall. I mean, like, Fred McMurray was really good at playing that role. I mean, most famously in Double Indemnity, was Fred McMurray the best example of that? But, like, yeah, like, there's a lot of that, like, a lot of that sense of alienation, which does, come back with, That's even a line in Gangster Squad.
Mm.
Like, I remember that. That's a line they go, it's like, well, we went to war, we learned how to fight, and now that's all we know how to do.
Yeah.
That's a badass line in the movie, but that's a horrific thing to hear from someone.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's like, well, you know what I know how to do? Kill people. I'm in law enforcement. What are you doing?
That's I think a really a powerful through line in these stories is, you know, and especially in these kind of more revisionist noirs, like I said before, where you portray these characters who are ostensibly supposed to be helping people and protecting the law, this kind of stuff, but they don't understand the people they're trying to help anymore. Like, they don't know them. They're trying to protect the world, but they're not of the world. You know, they have no connection to it, and so this leads to, again, this kind of you know, blasé, alcoholic, violent detective. Like you say, they don't know anything but how to go to war.
In the gameplay, does that like constrain the way you make your decisions?
How so?
So one thing I'm kind of thinking of here is, if he's bent into this, like, does the way your character accumulates sort of all of these threads coming to him, like, are those things that you are compelled to do as a player, or can you choose which way to go with
so a lot of the cases, like investigating them, you're kind of allowed to proceed in any fashion. Can, you know, take different angles. You can investigate different leads first. You can make different accusations, but the story always ends the same way. Your character always ends up in the same place. You don't have as much agency over defining who Phelps is or what he feels. It's not really that kind of story. You more
Interesting.
experience the world through Phelps, and then you get to decide if he believes people or not, and what decisions he makes as a detective in the case. It's like you're the investigative detective part of his brain, but everything else is not something you can change as the player. You don't really have control over his emotions in that way.
Okay, two thoughts there. Firstly, does his character, the first one's a question, does his character come out in cutscenes then? Like, do you see more of like I can't remember the guy who, like, let me see who played Cosgrove, because I don't want to keep calling him Cosgrove, but
it's Aaron something, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Staten.
Aaron Staten, yeah. So do you see Aaron Staten's performance as this guy in cutscenes?
Yes, yeah. Generally, like I said, the cases are in different departments. So each department you're in kind of has a few cases that you're assigned to. And in between the cases, you get glimpses of Phelps's life outside of work. And also just the way he interacts with people, even in the scenes where you can choose how he reacts. It's not like you're choosing who he is. It's more that Phelps has one of several things he might say in this scenario, and you choose which one he says based on how you, the player, feel about the investigation so far. So is he going to yell at this guy, or is he going to believe him and empathize with him? That kind of thing.
So that's very interesting to me, because that kind of goes into the second part. So this is kind of part of the recap of the experience of playing the game that I'm trying to get a hand on.
Yeah.
But you're the reasoning part of his brain.
Yeah.
More or less. That's what is gamified.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
That means that's also the part of his brain responsible for violence.
Yes, exactly.
Or are there certain acts of violence he is just bound to commit either way?
Oh, you know what? I can't recall. I think in a cutscene or two you might have to kill people, but in gameplay there is never a choice to be pacifistic, if that makes sense. Like, there are scenes where you have to shoot people. There are scenes where you have to beat somebody up, you know? There's no two ways about it. You can't go through the whole game without firing a shot, which I think would be the more powerful way to do a detective game, especially if it was made today. And you see that in other games. The immersive sim genre is a genre of game that is largely about player expression through mechanics, whereas LA Noire is more about player expression through narrative. It's not so much about you being able to avoid killing or avoid action. It's got a kind of pace that it wants you to follow, and part of that pacing is action, the blowout shootouts that you get in every noir movie.
Okay, and this plays into kind of the earlier question, like, is there any point, because you mentioned like he ends up doing illegal things kind of to try to do good.
Yeah.
Like the thing, kind of like Gandalf putting on the Ring of Power a little bit.
Yeah.
Or I guess the, LAPD officer given a 45 and near limitless ability to operate in 1940s Los Angeles. That's a pretty complimentary portrait of the LAPD now that I think about it. But are there scenes where you can decide whether or not he is tempted by different things, or are those things all also plugged in?
Yeah, pretty much plugged. Yeah. Again, it's not that kind of narrative game. sadly, I think that would have improved it. You get agency over, like I said, the investigative parts, but he's always going to be the same kind of noir protagonist. Although, importantly, he never becomes corrupt in the story. That's actually largely why he ends up dying. He goes up against the corrupt cops, and in doing so, he gets himself demoted and then eventually backed into a corner and killed.
So that's okay. That also kind of loops around L.A. Confidential a bit, because spoilers, but L.A. Confidential. Well, L.A. Confidential ends triumphantly, but that is what ends up happening at the heart of L.A. Confidential.
Yeah, you have to have your protagonist be the so-called good cop, right? You can't very easily make a noir story about a corrupt cop who's just
Well,
well, you could.
Yes,
could,
you
I guess.
can. There are several.
Yeah. That would be pretty interesting, actually.
There's pretty good ones. I mean, like Bad Lieutenant is both Bad Lieutenant movies are actually kind of gold standards for that. Actually, this is one of the things is like the Bad Lieutenant movie with Nicolas Cage.
Yeah,
is, I think one of the most idiosyncratic versions of a noir plot like you're going to get, because it's the quicksand plot about a man who is thoroughly corrupt. Like, it is about a man who is addicted to pretty much every substance he can get his hands on.
Yeah,
who commits several capital crimes over the course of like a week in his day-to-day occupation. And the ending is pretty open about whether or not he'll actually ever stop being in those circumstances. It's a really weird subversion of something even LA Confidential doesn't do so much. Well, maybe the movie doesn't do. The book probably does. I haven't read the book in a long time. It's a really weird book. But, like, you definitely could make a noir, a detective movie, like a straightforward detective movie about a corrupt cop wouldn't really work. But a noir movie about one definitely would.
I can imagine a lot of tension in a movie about someone covering their tracks, like maybe a so-called good cop who slips up, and has to then cover up the one corrupt thing they did, right? I imagine that's kind of a well-trodden plot, although I can't summon anything into mind right now. However, I think if a game like LA Noire was about a corrupt cop, I feel like gamifying that would be it would cause even more moral outrage than GTA does. And
in 1940s LA, you would be you'd be directly committing so many horrific crimes.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, that would just be a historical game about the LAPD during the Rampart years.
Yeah, and so I think LA Noire by necessity has its protagonist face up these corrupt cops. Although I think something the game doesn't do an adequate job of is actually criticizing the police in any meaningful way. Like it takes the tack of, it's these corrupt cops who are bad and there's good guys just trying to do their jobs, Like, it has elements of, oh, you're skirting the line, you're doing bad stuff in the name of the law. But it always comes out to that in the end. You're doing it in the name of justice, in the name of the law.
It's interesting to me. You get, like, the way Elroy and I think Charles Bukowski, who we didn't get around here to because it's not the area of noir this touches on, but Charles Bukowski is one of those figures, partially because he's such an LA figure, but also because he literally did write, his last novel was a send-up of film noir. It's a fucking weird book. But both of them have really interesting sort of ideas about cops.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, like Charles Bukowski's line, which is a line I use a lot, like, or like a line that's very quotable, is I like cops, just not when they're around. Just his angle on it. And then James Elroy, I don't know what a quote is, but James Elroy has a fascinating relationship with the LAPD because his books are some of the most gruesomely detailed books about what, if you, in any reasonable summary, is a horrific miscarriage of justice a lot of the time.
Sure.
But he also doesn't, like, James Elroy's moral compass is kind of freewheeling a lot of the time. That's the point of the books a lot of the time. Like, James Elroy doesn't really, I guess, that's not it. Doesn't like people. Like, it's fascinating because, like, James Elroy's politics are another thing entirely. I would not call his books critical of the LAPD, even though, in summary, they deeply are. It's more of a willingness to care kind of thing.
Sure.
I would say. Like, I might have to read more of his more recent ones, because I'm trying to think. Like, I've only read, like Black Dahlia and LA Confidential because of the movies.
Well, I haven't read any of them, so you're doing better than me already.
They're weird books, man. They're very weird books. I think I read them out of order too.
So I'd like to briefly actually call attention to two other games that I think are fascinating comparisons to make to LA Noire. The first of which is Mafia, which for obvious reasons it evokes a lot of comparisons. Also an open world crime game. It's in the title, Mafia. The second of which I think is the best game in the series. And again, that series involves organized crime in both New York and Los Angeles, and it depicts some historical characters. Although actually, does it? I can't even. I think it doesn't depict any historical characters. It takes place in fictional versions of those cities, so it may not. But I think Mafia, like Grand Theft Auto, your main character is always a criminal, but he's the kind of the bad guy with the heart of gold type, right? He's doing crime for a good reason. He's trying to pay off debts, help out his family, that kind of stuff. But again, like the escalation thing happens, they're through a series of cascadingly horrible situations. The protagonists end up having some tragic fall, doing horrific things, and then dying by the end of the story in almost every game. I haven't played the third one. And just, setting, time period, all that stuff, it all ties together. But I think the thing that those games do better is because your protagonist is a criminal, the open world crime stuff you can do is actually contextualized in the story. It's not unbelievable that a mafioso would go around and shoot up a store for jewelry, right? Whereas a cop would not. Or at least I would hope a cop would not.
I was going to say, we are talking about the LAPD here.
Yeah.
But, probably not. It depends who owns the store.
Yeah. So that's maybe something we can talk about more in the future. I'd advise you to look up Mafia 1 and 2. Their cutscenes are available on YouTube and not too long to watch. And I think they're both pretty well told stories.
From what you've told me about Saints Row, that seems like a mental progression.
Oh, Saints Row is just bizarre. That's a completely different realm.
We'll get to that in its own time.
Yeah.
For now, I think you've given me a good enough impression. I think I can recap what I understand LA Noire to be about.
Sure. Sorry, there was one other game I wanted to compare it to, if that's okay, before you do so.
Absolutely.
The second game is Disco Elysium, which I think is one of just the best games ever made, in my opinion. And the reason I think that it's relevant is because, like you were saying, in LA Noire, there's not really an ability to define what kind of protagonist Phelps is, only his decisions. Whereas Disco Elysium is very much that. It is like one of the main ways you define your character is something called a capo type, which is kind of like a class in that game. So, you can be a hard-boiled, shit-talking detective, or you can be the sorry cop who apologizes for everything he does. You can be a communist revolutionary cop. It's just amazing. Like the amount of depth with which you can illustrate your character in that game is just wonderful. And I think if that game, Mafia and LA Noire, had a baby, that would be one of the best games ever.
The continuum of characters from the RCMP to the guy from Dr. Zhivago. Alec Guinness, that's him.
Yeah. All right. Now, sorry. Yes, you may now summarize.
All right.
Summarize LA Noire for me.
The recap. Okay, you look out here at the City of Angels. We're going to talk like this. She out there, you see a lot of crime. You interactively inhabit. You are the logical brain of this poor, depressed young man, trying to do good in a hard world after having tested his mettle in a war against the ultimate evil. But now he's confronted with his home city, a rotten place, a desperate place, that he has to try and do good in, only to end tragically in the sewer.
LA Noire, coming fall 2010. That would be the perfect trailer narration. Oh man, I hope I got that right. When did it release? Hold on.
I should have put some more thought into like that monologue there.
Oh no, that was perfect. I was very close. It came out in May 2011. I was really close with fall 2010.
Wow, that's 10 years ago.
Yeah. It's a decade-old game now. And recently was re-released for virtual reality headsets, so you can investigate corpses with your real hands now.
Given what you've told, the context that we were talking about the corpses in, that is actually less comforting.
Yeah, it's bizarre. It's bizarre.
Well, all right. That's LA Noire.
That's LA Noire.
You gunfills here up, see?
That was a good time.
You know what you're going to do? I sound like a televangelist a bit. I'm putting more Southern on it than I need to.
Yeah, I don't think anyone in that game had. Well, no, not Phelps doesn't talk like that. At least
Does he have just an ordinary voice? Does he do like a?
Yeah, he just talks like he does in Mad Men. It's the same. Yeah, he doesn't have any kind of exaggerated accent or anything.
Pleasantly average white man voice.
Yeah,
yeah. I can live with that.
Well,
I like him a lot.
We both have pleasantly average white male voices, and I think it's time for us to stop talking with those average white male voices. So thank you all for joining us this episode. Do you have any parting words, Jake?
I say, all you pimps, punks, and poodles out there, you demon dogs with the hog logs. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do the entire thing. I already screwed it up. Cheers, everybody. Thanks for listening.
Bye now.